Asteroid of fear.
All right, let's get started. All right. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I have Joseph Drolshagen. I think he also goes by Joey. I heard that in an interview. But we're going to talk about self-improvement, mental health, mindset, alignment, all the things that we love to talk about here at the Men of the House podcast, navigating the chaos of everyday life and how to get better at it. Because we're all going to experience chaos at some point in time. But how's it going today?
It's going great, Rich. I'm excited to be here with you.
Awesome. I'm excited too. Yeah, a little bit of a late night, early morning for me, but this always makes it better, and especially the topics. But let's start off. Give us a little bit about your background, and this is kind of how I start every episode: is give the audience a little bit about the background. Let us know how we ended up in front of each other, because like I said before we started recording, that hey, there's usually a catalyst somewhere that got us into the space that we're in where we want to help others. And it usually comes from our own personal experience, our own personal tragedy, having to mend that and, hurt people and help people who've been helped want to help others. And people who've kind of run into something or fixed their own lives often become passionate about helping others. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And the works I do today, I was the guinea pig of. I grew up, in Detroit, Michigan, in a very low income family, and I watched my parents struggle my entire youth and stuff. And I got to adulthood, and I just started carrying out those same things. In my early 20s, if something came easy to me, I thought I didn't deserve it because I didn't work hard enough for it. So that's the place I come from. So from 22 years old, I've been a student of the works I do today. But at the same time, part of my conditioning was that a man gets a job and supports a family and hopefully lives long enough to enjoy some retirement, right? That's what we're raised on. And so I got into, I got into blue collar, and then from there I transferred over to white collar and built a career all the way up to a vice president of sales. Building massive territories, leading good sales teams, terrible sales teams, all that and stuff. And I never felt that fulfillment in it. I never felt really fulfilled in doing that. Later on, I would help companies in bankruptcy get back into profitability. And one of the confusing things with it, Richard, is I was really good at what I did, but it didn't fulfill me. And so as I started learning these tools in my own life and start understanding the subconscious conditioning and how it blocks us, from taking the right actions and things like that we can get into. But as that started opening up, the last organization I worked for, probably about 12 years ago now, maybe, is they were in bankruptcy. Within 7 months, we got back into profitability. New owners came in, and I said, okay, I'm done. And the catalyst for that is my dad passed away of cancer.
Oh.
And not even a year later, my mom passed away because she just didn't want to be alive without my dad, without her partner, without her, my dad. And I found myself there like an orphan, and yet I'm still doing this career that I never wanted. I'm glad now I did it because I get to help organizations and corporations and things like that with the works I do, but it was never that fulfilling. When I'm working with somebody, when I'm helping somebody get that breakthrough and get that light turn on, and see that difference in results, man, that'll put tears in my eyes just to see that happening. And one of the things I wasn't counting on, because my whole life was, you got to go after your goals, right?
Right.
You got to grab hold of what it is you want in life. And it was all based around me. And shifting this and going into it the way I have, I'm a servant.
Right.
I get to help people unlock their potential. I get to help people realize how much more is available to them than what their mind will allow them to grasp and things like that. And as I do that, man, I feel so fulfilled. I don't even want the things I used to want when I was in corporate and stuff, as far as, but yet I can have those things today.
Right.
So, and it's such a shift around from how I was raised and what my beliefs were, that as I serve, more comes to me.
I get a question while I'm thinking about it. This, you said growing up in Detroit, my wife's family's actually from Sheboygan, Michigan.
Oh
which is
yeah.
further north. And
Yep.
you know,
Beautiful area.
I think about, because I'm a Gen Xer, I'm 48, and
Okay.
my dad, their parents, pretty lower income, farmer
Mhm.
type people. And then I feel like the Gen X was definitely that, hey, like there was a lot of, maybe I'm the first person to go to college because my dad didn't get to go to college because they came
Yeah.
from World War II and Vietnam,
Yeah.
and they were workers and
The
workers.
mold breakers.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
I think though, like we see all this, and then like you said, you went from blue collar to more like white collar. And when you look at that, there's this idea of, I don't know about you, but I had my dad who grew up, or he worked construction and he owned his own construction company, but then he fell off a third floor scaffold, jacked up his back, had to have surgery. And he would always say, use your brain because your brain's it's not gonna give out as soon as your body. Now, if your dad in Detroit, I'm assuming there was some blue collar labor there. You saw your father work hard and to provide not as much. And sometimes it still wasn't enough. And so that kind of becomes this motivation to want to seek higher, to do better, because we've seen this. Our parents have told us this is the way, this is the American way. We're doing this so you can be the first one to go to college, so you can break that mold and you can have more. But kind of like yourself, I've reached certain levels through academia, different things that I just didn't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
a lot of it really touched me when you said this programming, because I don't think we realize how much programming goes into that and those decisions we make. And then you love your parents. I wanted to be a people pleaser. So you do all these things, you go after it, you're people pleasing, you're told this is the American way and American dream. You reach the level that you thought was supposed to fulfill you, and it doesn't. And
Yeah.
so, do you find that that's kind of something, did it take you a little bit to pick up on that and to understand that and realize it?
Yeah, it's yeah, when you talk about the Gen X, so am I. And it really is breaking molds. I'm the first one in my family with a college degree. I'm the first one to
Mm-hmm.
cross over white collar America. And really, if you look at it, even my career in corporate America, as I was learning these things and it was, unfolding into what I do today, it's unrealistic that this kid from Detroit, growing up the way I grew up, would be doing what I'm doing today, would have an impact in corporate America that, that my works have had and things like it's not realistic, and that's part of that. Yeah, we get in that trend of that, and so many people live by what they're conditioning in the subconscious. There's what I call a motherboard that hosts all of our conditioning, our patterns, paradigms, habits, belief systems, even experiences, Richard, that we didn't have firsthand, but somebody told us about, goes into that programming, and we
Oh,
live through that as gospel. And so what happens is we go to break out of that, or we go to take a step outside of it or beyond it, or we, and what happens is that conditioning steps up, and that conditioning, that motherboard, is what triggers our brain waves to the actions we either take or we don't take. So if something is uncomfortable, if it's outside of our comfort zone, if something is abnormal to us, somebody struggling financially will not take a step into opening up financial freedom that somebody who doesn't have that same conditioning will take. But what's the good news about that is, like the SMT method that honestly came through me. It
mm-hmm.
wasn't so, I'm not smart enough to have put the whole thing together
Right.
to have the impact it has, but it identifies and shifts that conditioning to open it up. So right now, people living under that conditioning, that most of us are not even aware of that conditioning playing out, because we're so used to taking common actions. And so we get the same common results over and over and over. And what people do is they say, I want this, and they'll take common actions, and it produces common results, and they'll do it again until they're burned out. And what happens is they take their visions of the impact they want to have in this world, or what they want to have in their life and experience in this lifetime, and they start reducing that. So we end up living at a mediocre level to the true desires we have. And some people I come across are so ingrained in this pattern, in this conditioning, they'll never be able to break outside of it. Nobody can help them do that, because if it doesn't fit in that, it's wrong. And they're so mindset locked to that that they can't experience anything differently. But somebody who's struggling with that and says, honestly, the ideal client is somebody who says, man, I don't know why I can't get to this level. Man, I've given it all I've got and I can't get there, and I don't know why. That's somebody that the SMT method or anything else that deals with levels like that can help somebody identify, shift, and move beyond that to achieve that level that they want to achieve.
So you've mentioned the SMT method twice. What
Yes.
exactly is it, and how does it assist individuals to achieve their greater results with less effort?
Yeah. So the SMT stands for subconscious mindset training. So, without going into bringing out models and stuff like that, we have a conscious mind, right? And in our conscious mind is our knowing. It's what we know, our desires, our visions, or things like that, And then we have the subconscious. In the subconscious, there's that motherboard of all of our programming, beliefs, everything I've said, is in that motherboard. But that motherboard is what kicks off the brain waves to the actions we take or don't take. So somebody who comes from, like I did, when I was in my 20s and thought, man, if something came easy, I didn't work hard enough, so I didn't deserve it. And I would move aside, I would not capture the results of those things because of that belief, and because that brain waves would not allow me to take the steps to go, no, this is how we want to live. So I would continue to go the struggle way to achieve what I wanted to achieve and work massive actions, exhausted, all that stuff. And so what happens is the SMT method right from day one starts identifying that conditioning. And then there's tools to start shifting that to opening up to greater results for our efforts going into something. It's that simple.
Wow. Yeah, that's, you mentioned something there, and I think about conditioning towards money. Growing up, if you hear your parents always say that the people who had money who are crooked, or they did
Money doesn't grow
something
on
bad,
trees.
or they did it something illegal to get it,
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
is, you hear all these things.
Yes.
And I realized, I'm like, it took me a long time. And I have to admit, it was like more recently that I really had a shift. And I had an interview with one of the guys from Next Level University, and they had talked about hitting $1 million and 1 million listens. And when I heard that episode, before I had interviewed him, it was the first time I ever thought, like, that's $1 million of added value. I go, you could invest in a McDonald's and make $1 million, but are you adding value to people's lives? I go,
Right.
and that's a difference. And
Yes.
I remember going, that's a mind shift set for how you feel about money. That you see somebody's hard work as value added, not that they did something terrible or they were swindlers and
Right.
con people out of their money to get it. And I was like, man, that's a very important kind of moment for me. But it kind of goes back to like what you said, is that motherboard, there's so much that's implanted on it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't even
And most
know.
times we take actions. And if you really broke it down, one of my favorite quotes is by Wallace Waddles, and he says, if you are not consciously choosing to be rich, excellent, and healthy, then you're unconsciously choosing to be poor, mediocre, and unhealthy. And you think about that and you go, well, unconsciously, how many people go to the same job day in and day out and they can't stand what they're doing? I know I did that for years.
Yeah.
How many people live in financial struggle and they'll get a little, like something will happen, unexpected monies will come in, and all of a sudden it just goes down the same track where all of a sudden it's just gone. Something comes up or things like that and stuff. And it's all based on that same conditioning playing out. We will create situations and circumstances to take that extra money because it follows into the truth of what's in our subconscious. And that conditioning is that we struggle financially.
Yeah.
So breaking those and stuff, and that's one of the things like I said, the SMT method, I got to give God credit, because I'm not smart enough to come up with that. And it took me almost 3 decades I didn't set out to create that. I just want to help people not have to live like I live. I want to help people. My real heart draw to this is is, Richard, my parents were such great people, man. They came from tough upbringing, being raised and stuff, and 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 they didn't have these tools available that they have today. And to see them and to see what that was like, and especially once I was able to start shifting and getting to that other side and see how easily life can happen and how I can have big aspirations and desires for life and see those come to reality. I don't ever want to see people in that place where my parents were, and have to live that way anymore. And that's really my big heart, and impacting millions of people's lives. When we talk about the servant's heart and being here to help people live better lives, the results of the SMT method are just like, I can't believe it. Like, my clients will have breakthroughs, man. I'll be in tears talking to them and how it happens and stuff. But even in the results, I mean, taking a business and take it. So everybody I work with, I start with developing a dynamic vision. So right there, when we're developing that, what's the best possible life we could have, we start bumping up against that conditioning. Because as we start thinking of it, even our conditioning will step up with the voice we hear in our head. Who do you think you are? Oh, come on, really? Nobody in your family's done that. All the stuff that we hear with stuff like that. And what they'll do is they'll start lowering down what they truly desire. Now, they truly desire still up here, but they're coming to that settling point of, okay, if I can get to this, it'll be good enough. That good enough life, that mediocre life. And there's so much more available. I have an example I can go into really quick for that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I do is I help businesses, grow and things like that. And we work through the same way. But what we come up, I was working with somebody, they had their business, 13 years in business, their highest year ever was $7.5 million a year in revenue. So we start out with a vision. They got to $10 million with the vision. And that was their,
right.
It
Stretch.
wasn't what they wanted. It's what they thought was possible. So I helped them bump that to 12.5.
Okay.
In 12 calendar months. And we start building the excitement. We start stepping into it. As we step into it, we bump against more conditioning. So it's really about shifting that, identifying and shifting the conditioning. Within 12 months, they went from $7.5 million highest year to almost $23 million and been maintaining that for 6.5, going on 7 years now.
That's awesome.
And I have story after story after story, and it can be like that. It can be in love relationships. It can be with finances. It can be whatever it is. It works the same way.
Man, I think of, what automatically comes to mind is I hear, we'll call it a bad mentor, or we'll call it conditioning or parenting, however you want to call it. But when you said that, because I've noticed where I even fill out, like, let's say a questionnaire, and you're like, how would you want your salary to go? Let's say as a podcaster, how much did I make the first year? How much did I make the second? And, if you wanted to make incremental things, and you look at it and you short sight yourself, because I hear, like, my mom or somebody going, let's be realistic. Let's be realistic. Like, okay,
yeah,
you're not going to go from, you made 15,000 this year in your first year of podcasting to $1 million your second year, but you don't know. If you don't allow and set for it, if you shortchange yourself and say, well, I made 15 this year, my goal is to make 30 next year, and then hopefully after that, and maybe within 5 to 6 years, I could make $1 million. But that's I feel it limiting, scrunching myself, as opposed to going, how do you know it's not around the corner? And how do you know it's not all of it? And how do you know that that's the top? Why are you putting that into your head?
And even but it's all programming stuff. We're programmed to look at things like that, and if you look at the way schools so many different organizations we're involved in and stuff like that, it's all based on like robotic living. Right? The one size fit all. That's one of the things that's different about SMT. I won't go into, but it's not a one size fit all. It's unique to each individual that goes through the program and stuff with me. And so with that, we look at that like robotic actions and stuff like that. I was brought up like, you have your goals. You have a good, better, and a best.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And in corporate, you have your, have your
Stretch,
main your stretch goals and then your regular and this and that. So I will not allow a client I'm working with to have an A and a B goal. I won't. And the reason I won't is because whenever we have B, that's what we can count on hitting. Because it fits more into the comfort zone. It fits more into our strategic thinking that, okay,
And it gives
if
you
I
an
have
out.
to do this, how am I going to do it? But there's so many other avenues for things to come out of the blue, coincidences, everything else that we don't count on. But when we put our focus on that vision of that expanded, we get closer to it or go beyond, even go beyond it than we do if we're working with a plan A or B or the good, better, best or stretch goals or things like that. So I don't play with those at all. We get clear on it. I help expand it beyond even what they say, because then that taps into more of that conditioning. Right. And so as we do, then we identify, shift that, we start opening up. And one of the things I absolutely love about this is how quickly my clients start getting like an excitement. Like they say, I've never felt this excited about life as I do. And it's because we've gone through some of that conditioning. We've opened up for them to at least see the potential of something, even though they don't know how, to see the potential of something bigger than they've ever experienced happening in their life. And it just,
I see it though. Like as we were talking about goals and plan A and B, I can see it just sometimes in my own thinking. And like, this has been my transformational kind of year. And so I feel like I'm in this place of connecting dots and just going like, that having that plan B gives you a way out of plan A, out of actually reaching your dreams. It's
and why do we not want to reach that plan A? Everybody wants to reach it, Richard, but the reason that shuts them down is because they don't know they don't know what's blocking them in that conditioning. It all comes back to that. Well, regardless of what it is. And when you talked about being a transformational year, I feel like every year of my life has been just a continual transformation, and it continues to be. And I could, so right now I'm getting ready. We're gearing up to launch the Institute to certify other coaches in the SMT program, so that it can expand the impact now. And even after I'm gone, my life works will continue on like that.
Well, I want to get into that though. So I took us down a little side path, but you became orphaned, and I remember hearing that term in a podcast I listened to you when I was kind of doing research, and I love the phrasing of it because I feel like it puts a different context on how I lost my parents. My parents are no longer with us. When you said orphan, because my wife was adopted and all of her siblings are as well, and by one family, and that feeling of what an actual orphan feels like. And it's much more than just losing your parents. And all of a sudden, everything you've known, that anchor to the outside world that you grew up with, that put a lot of information into that motherboard, is now no longer there. So if that was one of those tipping points, when and how did you start going, okay, I'm not fulfilled? And you said you're not smart enough to come up with it. It came to you, but how did you figure it out? What kind of self-improvement work and what things were you doing after you had that so-called orphan feeling? Were you journaling? Did you do any therapy? And how did you figure out all this stuff and have this information come to you? What was going on in that time of your life?
It's all the above. When that happened to me and I started realizing those things were happening, even though I didn't want to believe that things had to be hard.
Right.
But if they were easy and I'd go, see, that's what I mean. It would be backup at first because I was the victim of life, So I'd be like, see, that's what I mean. Like something comes along and it's easy and it doesn't work out because I didn't work hard enough and I bought into but then additional conditioning on top of that and stuff like that. It was like, man, something's messed up in me. And that's what I thought in my 20s is something's not right about me. Like something's not right. That all my thinking, the way things would work out, the results and things like that. And so I started, because I didn't know any better, I started right away in coaching. and in counseling rather. And I was going to group, and I was going to one-on-one, and I was going to things like that. And I learned some things in that and stuff as far as like what it means to have a healthy self-confidence and things like that, even though I didn't have it then. I started understanding what it looked like to have that, and playing with it. And then probably in my upper 20s, things came out like The Secret. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I bought the VHS because I'm that old. I miss being a baby boomer by 11 days. So, but I'm still a Gen X. But anyway, so with that, I listened to that thing, man. I had the VHS. I made a tape recording of it. I even found a study guide I bought, and I just dove into that, Richard. And I was definitely the most positive person in my thinking and the way I would talk than anybody I knew or hung out with. People thought there was something the matter with me because of the way I was, but it didn't change anything in my results. And at that time, I didn't understand why. But later on, I would step into coaching, and I would start taking coaching programs, and I would do things like that. And so much of it was based on massive actions, exhaustive efforts. If you want something, you got to be willing to trade off your life. And I was doing all of that already. I was traveling. I was in sales at the time, and I was traveling 4,000 to 5,000 miles every single week building territories. And so I would just do these big loops across the United States and things like that, or Europe and whatever, building these sales territories and stuff. And I would add maybe $1 million a year total to it. So it was pretty minimal, and and then I just kept going forward in it. I took coaching programs, and I wouldn't get results out of that. Things didn't get easier. Nothing changed. And I would think, man, it just built on that conditioning that there must be something wrong with me.
It's almost like you dig yourself a deeper hole in a way.
That everything that happened fed that even more as being my truth. And that's what happens to so many people, is they get this false belief about themselves that's coming from the subconscious. And then because they have that false belief, they're expecting the results of that false belief. And so they show up, and then it makes that even stronger and stronger and stronger in that conditioning of it. And that's a lot of things I help with my clients and stuff too. And so with that, I'm going through it. And at some point, I came across the whole thing with mindset and stuff like that. The secret was a lot with mindset and stuff, but I came across the subconscious, and I started reading and studying that and everything else. And at some point I got coaching for that, and they were able to help me see how my thinking from the conditioning was causing the results. And I could see that in a couple areas, but it wasn't anything that was really permanent as far as the change goes.
Right.
So as I got these tools, and like I said, I continued working with coaches that were along those areas and stuff, but through the process of my trial and error, which is why I say I'm a guinea pig for everything I teach today and I talk about today, is I started understanding deeper and deeper the subconscious. I started understanding how the vision, how all the pieces of the SMT method are essential to help permanent change. And today, I still have conditioning that doesn't do me well. I still work with a coach today in my life because they help me see that conditioning, and I don't have to go through as much misery to identify it.
Yeah.
But as far as making those shifts and experiencing life differently, it's unrealistic of where I was that I'm where I'm at today. And I've been able to have the impact I've had today. And even, I say it's through God, but even that I did my part in the SMT. And I didn't do my part, I lived it. When my parents passed away, and I talked about that with the orphan, I don't know a better description than how I felt living in that phase of life, is I just felt like I was abandoned, completely left alone to figure out life on my own, Now, one thing I want to say, I'm sorry, I just went to add this on. I'm sorry, because I talked about the adding $1 million traveling 4,000 to 5,000 miles, right? As I'm learning these tools, as I'm stepping into it, as I'm opening up my beliefs and possibilities and things like that. So I was working for a $50 million organization. Within 50 miles from where I lived, I landed a $25 million year-over-year contract and took us overnight from a 50 to a $75 million organization.
It's almost like car
Prior,
accidents. They happen within 25 miles of your house.
yeah, but the reason I said that is I was traveling 4 to 5 thousand miles to
I
add a
know.
million. Now this one's like right there, and it was easy, it was enjoyable, it was exciting. It had like all of the ingredients of like a major opening in life to teach me something different.
What did it teach you?
It taught me that life really can be easy. It taught me that I wrote a book called Life's Lessons. And it's all about, for me to get out of that victim mode, which
Hmm.
my conditioning will always place me in the victim spot. To get out of that place, I had to start looking at life differently. So as things started happening, and this is before, like, the 25 million, but as things started happening in my life, and the turnaround started coming about where I could see results, is I wrote this book, and it's all about, to get out of that victim mode, to get out of life happening to me mode. I had to take the judgment off of what was happening. So things couldn't be good or bad anymore. They couldn't be right or wrong, fair or unfair, or anything else. Because as soon as I do that, I'm sidestepping a little bit the conditioning. But when I do that and get the judgment out of it, as long as there's judgment, I can't do anything. I'm the victim of it, and go through forgiveness and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But once I take myself out of that victim mode and put myself more in a power mode, then I can start looking and saying, why is this happening for me? And when I started doing that, all of a sudden I could start seeing how exactly what you were saying at the beginning, how one thing was leading to another thing. To I had to experience this and go through the pain of this to get the understanding of it, to get to that next level.
Well, and that's kind of what I was actually going to ask was what was that kind of aha moment where and it sounds like this deal played a big part, but also, you tried coaching, you tried all these different things, and they would work a little bit, but not 100% work. And do you remember the exact point of where you were like, I guess maybe the SMT kind of came to you and you were like, okay, I've done all this. It's taken me this far,
Yeah.
but something worked, something happened, and you're like, I think I got this. And I think it's related to this, and I need to do more of this. And I'm sure at some point as it evolved, you were like, this is what it's going to be called, or, um, do you have a moment that you actually remember, like, where you're like, this is the way. I've got something that works because it either just worked or you had that aha moment where it was that exact shift in thinking that you're like, more of this.
There's multiples,
Hmm.
but for me, it never really came about as this is the breakthrough, this is it, I
Hmm.
mean, there's like a light switch going on.
Yeah.
It came across more like, okay, I'm in a position where it's painful, and feeling like I'm not enough or getting enough or whatever it is and stuff like that. And then things would happen, and the outcome later on of the improvement would be there, and then I would realize,
Mm.
those things took me to this point. And I can give you one that was a big example for me. We
Yeah.
were talking, before we came live here, is I got into a position I couldn't stand being in corporate America. I'm glad now I was, because it helps me to help the clients I work with and stuff. But I didn't want to be there. Making all kinds of money and everything else, and it wasn't fulfilling, and I just felt like life was empty. And I turned to alcohol,
Hmm.
and I turned to alcohol long enough to where I had to reach out and ask for help to bring that change around. Now, all of that was painful, going through the change, going through all that stuff and everything. And I can tell you years later now that alcohol was a great friend to me, because it beat me down so bad, Richard, that I really had one or two choices: either to die, go out the bitter end, or to be willing to ask for help. And when I asked for help is the beginning of this life that I'm living today.
Yep. Sometimes, yeah.
And
I
we,
I hit a year a little bit ago, last month, and I felt like I was kind of at the same point. Was something has to change. Either you check out or you figure it out and do whatever it is you need to do and talk to people and get that support and all the self-work that's involved. But as you were going through that, it made me think of something. And this is how it's come to me in pieces. Because, like I said, I'm kind of in my transformational year. And oftentimes, if I drank and then would get drunk, then I increased my negative self-talk. And what was that doing to the motherboard? Horrible. So it's like, not only is it already bad for you, but if you have programming, and we all do, it almost like cements it down and makes it
and
worse and makes it that much more difficult to climb back out of, because it's just sticking all those beliefs even more.
and you and I are talking about alcohol here.
Yeah, but
It
there's
could be,
everything
it could be gambling. It can be workaholic. It can be porn. It can be
hmm
anything that we're trying to use
to escape.
to deal with what we're not dealing with, rather than going through and dealing with it. And the hopes in that that I have for anybody going through that stuff is that it put them in such a position of pain that they become willing to ask for help and then go into that with an open mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I don't know. I don't think I've ever met anybody who quit who regretted it.
Yeah.
So if you look
Yeah.
at it that way and you go, if there's somebody listening right now who has that doubt, I mean, I can undoubtedly tell you my life is completely different, and I am not near near the
Yeah.
same person I was. And kind of like you said, I still have some stuff on my motherboard that
Yeah.
doesn't serve me well,
Yes.
but that's all kind of it's a process. And but thankful for me as a podcaster, I get to interview a bunch of great people and I get so
Yeah.
many techniques and so much stuff. So um I had something from your profile about IFGT
Mm-hmm.
and IFGT life coaching, and I kind of want to go into what is that and how does that kind of tie into SMT or
Yes. Well, IFGT is a core of my. I told you I started doing these works at 22 years old.
uh-huh.
I know I was 22 years old because I went and listened to a speaker. His name was Jack Boland up in Warren, Michigan. And I don't remember a word he said, but I remember igniting this thing inside of me that there's more to my life. There's a bigger mission to my life. There's more fulfillment available to me. And that's really when I started on that pathway very strongly. And excuse me. And throughout the process of that, and not stepping away from corporate America until about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When I decided I was going to do this, I started getting education, certifications, things like that, and everything else towards it and stuff. The only reasonable name of the organization is IFGT. It stands for It's Freaking Go Time.
Oh,
And it really is. It's time to quit taking small steps. It's time to quit taking, the sneak arounds and the ways of getting around things and stuff. And it's
safe,
time to safe.
safe.
Yes, the safe ways, and it's time to step out. And I try and I follow that in my life. One of the things I did when COVID hit and stuff is I was like, man, I went hang gliding and I got certified to hang glide.
Oh,
So I've
how
been off of a 2,000-foot mountaintop over by Chattanooga 7 times now with just
that's
me and a hang
cool.
glider. And I'll tell you, it's just like anything else. When people say, I don't know how you can do that. I don't know how I could shift, like my life could be shifted from what it was to what it is today, but it's the same thing. It's those fears want to hold us back. But the moment my feet leave the ground, when I went for my first solo launch off that mountaintop, and I'm standing there, and they gave me the clearance, and my insides are going, don't do it, and you got maybe 3 steps, and
Yeah.
you're off the ledge, and so and in that 3 steps, you're supposed to walk, jog, run, which I don't know how you can do that with 3 steps, but you got to get moving some. So I take the first one, and I could feel my heart beating in my throat, and everything's going, stop, stop, stop. But the moment my feet left the ground and I was airborne, oh my God, I felt a feeling of soaring and fulfillment, and like just miraculous beyond what I even thought it would feel like. And that's the same thing for anything, whether it's hang gliding, whatever it is. When we step out into it, when we shift that conditioning, when we take that steps out, there's going to be fear. But just the other side of that fear is the fulfillment we wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve. The feeling of ecstasy and happiness and all of it is right there.
Man. Yeah, I think about it as a speaker, public speaking is often, a most feared thing.
Yes.
I've definitely been on some stages, of course, in the
Mhm.
beginning stages of podcasting. I still get nervous before a podcast.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter how much I've read about the person, 50 published episodes, I'm like, I still might have to pee twice in 10 minutes. And my wife's like, you're crazy, but you've done this a bunch of times. But,
Yeah.
like I say, I go, well, but it's also excitement, because
Yes.
now I'm energized. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm learning a lot,
Yes.
and it's great. And it's kind of one of those things of that's how you have to look at it, is that, when it comes up to your throat right there, it's like, just give it a minute. Give it a minute, ride it out,
But
sit through
keep going.
sit through that discomfort, because what is it? Anxiety and excitement, they're very close to each other emotionally.
Yeah. The only
So,
difference is breath.
oh, I didn't know
When
that.
we're anxious, we hold our breath. When we're excited, we breathe more into it.
So you could change it just by changing your breath.
Absolutely, you can. If you notice you're feeling like that, I have taken times when it's been anxiety, and I just started breathing and shifted it to excitement.
That's how that works.
Yeah.
That's a good, easy explanation too. I can explain to my 10-year-old daughter. When I tell her
Yeah.
to breathe, she's like, what's that gonna do? But
Yeah.
when you know these things, you can kind of do that. But I was thinking, I was like, so all this stuff kind of comes together. You've been out of corporate America for 12 years. You were doing your coaching. When did so is IFGT is your company, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. When did you start that? And how was it going from, let's say, corporate America, because I'm used to that, into an entrepreneurial type journey, which is a little bit different, and you got to do it all and figure it out. Although I think, like me, I think there's a lot of tools you learn in corporate America. How to do business with other corporations and
Yes.
other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were things I could not have counted on that were happening. At the same time, I moved down to the mountains of South Carolina, where the way I've always wanted to live and stuff
Uh-huh.
like that. So that was kind of the kickoff of it. But I resigned from that position once we got new owners and stuff like that. I resigned from that position, and I had like 2 people I was working with in the coaching side. I already had the certification, some of the
Right.
certifications I have today and stuff. But and I just said, I'm either gonna do this now or I'm never gonna do it. And it was that year after my parents and stuff like that and stuff. So I was like, I don't care if it fails. I just can't stand living like this anymore. And as I did it and things came together, and sometimes it was hard. Sometimes I'd go back into the conditioning of massive actions, especially after COVID, because before COVID, I was running the business and I was doing better, like revenues, things like that and stuff were better than they were in corporate, and then COVID hit, and I had, I think it was 7 or 10, 12, whatever it was, speaking engagements cancel the same
Oh
day.
yeah.
And everything just fell to the bottom, and I didn't have an online presence. And so I went from there and had to redo it. And I went into the massive actions, exhaustive efforts, everything else with it and stuff like that. And then once I got so deep into that and started realizing that, I got another coach is what helped me realize that, to be honest with you. And as I did that, then I started going into the other side and I started opening things back up. And now, like, being here and being able to even talk about launching the Institute is it's like, man, how awesome, how blessed am I? How awesome is this life? And I don't know how to launch an institute. I've never done it before.
Hey, after you finish listening to this amazing podcast, be sure to give it a 5-star rating. Then go check out the other podcasts in the Podcast Connection Network, including my own, Magic and Metamorphosis. Check us all out. The link will be in the episode's description.
But as I'm going through it, the pieces are showing up like anything else. The pieces are
Mhm.
showing up, and I get fear, and I get like, man, am I sure about this? Am I sure? You know, but just keep, like you said, continue to move through it, and everything comes together.
Is that kind of what kind of tech when you get those feelings? Because I know,
Yeah.
man, there was points in the podcast, of course, and of course I've kept going. But there were a few times that it was rough, and I was like, man, should I be doing this? You feel imposter syndrome. I'm sure, coming from corporate America, you're a life coach, you're like, oh, who's gonna, it's one of those things of like, do I have what other people want? Or is that even what I, should be focusing on other than focusing on helping them open the doors to get what they want?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what kind of stuff techniques did you use when the tough got going? How did you
There's a lot of them. I mean, I think some, like, one of the times after COVID and stuff, when things, I told you about, I was getting in hang gliding over COVID, but when everything fell off and stuff like that, man, I was lost. I thought, man, did I make a mistake? It was one of the big times when I was like,
yeah.
oh man, I made a mistake. I really messed up and blah 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 and this and that and stuff. But somehow the pieces came together, and sometimes I was just operating day to day with that. Man, did I make a mistake? And turn to prayer, turn to talking,
Hmm.
guidance people and things like that and stuff. My other irons, iron sharpens iron, and turning and but I think the one thing that really kept me looking forward and not turning around going the other way was, I told you that about my parents.
Hmm.
And I truly in my heart don't want to see anybody have to live like that. And at those times, because of the changes I experienced and stuff, I could look at that and say, I know this is real and it's possible. So even though I'm not feeling it right now, it's conditioning stuff. Sometimes I go back and shift the conditioning, but even though I'm not feeling it right now, it's okay. I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
And I remember being asked to speak to at a worldwide convention for a church. I was asked to do a talk, and it was all ministers, 300 some ministers there, and I'm up there, and I and I gave a talk on prosperity. And I remember it wasn't planned or anything, but I remember sometime in the whole thing, it's just like it just hit me, and I just stopped, and I go, look at this kid from Detroit standing here in front of all you people talking to you about prosperity. Like, how awesome is my life? And you have those moments that are embedded into my memory that I can go back to, that are have replaced some of the old conditioning, that
Hmm.
I can go grab it and grab those nuggets and access those and build the desire for what can be stronger than what the fear I'm feeling is.
Yeah. I think feelings are definitely important. And I know when you use, let's say, even like with sports people who use visualization techniques, trying to hone in on that feeling of what success feels like.
Yes.
And I'm kind of the same way in terms of like with the podcast. Like I can remember doing my first in studio guest spot,
Yes.
and I was like, well, I don't think these avenues or doors would be opening if this wasn't the right direction,
Yes.
you
Yes,
know.
absolutely. And even if I can just focus on that at those times, another door will open.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm in the other side, chances are that door is still going to open, but I'm not going to notice it because I'm in that other side. So when I tell people living through our conditioning actually blocks us from achieving what we want to achieve, it's not that the opportunities aren't there, but we're just not noticing them.
We're just not seeing them.
when we get into that alignment, when we shift that conditioning, all of a sudden we start noticing more of those opportunities showing up to fulfill that.
It's almost like, you know, when you lose your keys or something like that, and they're in the most common place right in front of you,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
see it because you're in
I
this
love when
place
people
of
have their
not.
I love when people have their glasses on their head and they're frantically looking around for their glasses.
Oh, the craziest was when I was in boot camp, people would be like, "Who took my towel?" And they're wearing their towel
Where,
coming out of
yeah,
the
yeah.
shower. I'm like, "Really? Nobody took your towel." But do you use any visualization, any type of stuff like that? And you had mentioned The Secret. What's your kind of take on it? I mean, I
Yeah.
think so for me, I think there's all kinds of energies. There's spectrums we can see of light. There's hearing frequencies. So there's all kinds of frequencies that
Yes.
are amiss to us
Yes.
that some people can tap into. And whether you want to believe they're there or not, they are there. So it's a matter of, you know, so I think, you know, personally, I think there's a lot of information, there's a lot of techniques, but I think all of them have degrees of use and truth to them.
Absolutely. And when I talked about the vision, like we get into the vision, what does it look like? But then we get into that place. What's it going to feel like living that life? And we start tapping into those
Mhm.
emotions. And as we do that, we're butting up against the conditioning that's holding us back. And then as we start shifting that, that excitement for that vision will pull us through so many of the fears and things that we experience. Like one of the things is, you know, like we are so adapted at living by our situations and circumstances, right? If something's happening and I don't like what's happening, then right away that's pulling my action, it's pulling my attention, it's pulling my emotions, everything's pulled to that whole thing there. But when we have a vision, when we have what I call a dynamic vision that of what we want to experience in life, and we start putting that on, we start getting in that place and the emotions and everything else of it, all of a sudden situations and circumstances can just be little blips or you know, speed road
Mhm.
bumps, you know, in life, instead of pulling us into them with it. So it has less draw towards that side, which keeps us more forward thinking and emotionally attached and everything else to the vision of what we want. Because what I end up doing with my clients, I don't know if this will make sense, but we live that the realistic possibilities of our life is that vision. Everything else we're experiencing is just snapshots in time of what it looks like as that vision is unfolding.
Hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
Very, I love deep, deep thoughts, things that make me think and things that make me ask myself questions, or just a different way to see it, how I can even reframe and uncouple
Yeah.
from the conditioning. Because, man, you know, I don't know if it was last night or something, but something prompted this thing of, I go, you know why it's so hard for two people to be married? I go, think about all the conditioning I had, and my wife had totally different conditioning. Your families are totally different, your backgrounds, the whole views, what you grew
Yes.
up seeing and hearing. And then you bring that together and you wonder why it's hard to see eye to eye sometimes.
And one of the things I love about the experiences I've got to have through the SMT method and working with people is I've worked with people who, like a couple weeks into coaching, I find out that
Uh-huh.
somebody's got a 37-year marriage and they coexist. They don't do anything together other than share the house, the kids are raised and stuff like that. And within a month, they're living like newlyweds again.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'll talk, and I had the guy actually come up. It was in Michigan. I had the guy came up and did a testimonial for me at a live workshop I was doing, and we talked about that. And he said exactly what I just told you in maybe different words, but and then I said, okay, so you've been working with me. What's your wife done? And he said she hasn't done nothing. Like she hasn't been working on herself. She hasn't been getting coaching. We hasn't been, it's just testament to the fact when I change from the inside, when I go through and go through transformation, everything in my world has to transform with me or it will fade away.
You have to bring those up around you, or, well, you know, you are the sum of the five people you hang around most.
Yeah. But even, and it's not even bringing people up. It's not purposely doing something. But as I
Right.
shift and I change, my son will notice shifts and changes. The people close to me in my life will notice shifts and changes and things. I don't have to purposely,
Right.
have them do that. It's just a byproduct of going through transformation, of living a better life.
Speaking of that, I could imagine that another reason what you're doing in this change is also so meaningful for you is that, had your parents not passed away, you may have never made this change. But unfortunately, on Earth, they were unable to see your fullest potential and what you've become. And I'm sure that that's hard to sit with sometimes, but I'm sure it's also fuel to go out there and help others. And if we believe that, of course, not that it's limited to here on Earth, that they know. But how did the other people in your life around you, how have they reacted to your transformation?
When I would talk to, because a lot of my friends, or people I worked with who were working
Right.
for GM or this or that or whatever else and stuff like that. So when I would talk about this stuff, they go, "Oh my God, you got the best job in the world. You're making killer money. You get a company car. You get this and that. At one point, golf course membership, like and they like you there, and you're doing good. You're having like, man, life can't get any better than that." And they couldn't understand. They couldn't understand the unfulfillment that I felt and how badly that weighed on me and impacted me and things like that. And so when I stepped away, I mean, I've had some friends that walked away from me. Later on, I would start understanding because they were as miserable as I was, but they for some reason they weren't, maybe not as miserable as I was, because they weren't willing to do something different to get
Right.
something different,
Or
And
they
so
didn't believe it.
some of them faded away. Some of them have come to me, since that time. Even some of them were ticked off at me for doing what I was doing. They thought I was kicking a gift horse in the mouth, and then now that we talk, and my close circle of people experience changes in their life because of being close to me and what I've gone through.
Yeah.
My son has gone through such transformation at such a younger age than I was because of what I do. And I don't preach it to him or things like that. It just comes out through our relationship.
By seeing you, by you living your principles.
And seeing it, I mean, seeing the
Right.
changes, seeing the difference, seeing the things like that. And one thing I want to go back to, because I feel like with The Secret and stuff like that, that's great. All that stuff is great. The problem is it's all taught as a one size fit all. But Richard, you're not like I am. What works for me is not going to, as far as like the one size fit all type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
talking positive things like that, it's not going to work for you. And that's why I think that's the uniqueness, the biggest uniqueness thing of the SMT method is it lays out a pathway, but it's unique to every person who steps into that journey. It's
Mm-hmm.
unique based on your conditioning. It's unique based on your desires. It's unique based on your experiences. It's unique for you and every person that goes through it. And what I love is I get to be a guide and be there to see all the uniqueness of each person and see it happening and coming to the other side and opening up the avenues and stuff like that. It is like so incredible.
It makes me think of my wife and I, we went to San Francisco on our honeymoon, and when we're doing
Mm-hmm.
Alcatraz, you get the headphones. And so it's almost like the system is the headphones, the lecture. Everybody kind of goes through the same thing, but you're there in your own ears, having your own experience
Yes.
that's unique to you.
Yes. And it is part of that. It's also built into the avenues we go and
Mm-hmm.
what that brings up and what it touches on, things like that. One of the things that bothers me with coaching, and probably because I bought into it and spent so much, investment of time, money, resources, everything else into it and stuff, to walk away thinking there was something wrong with me, is whenever I see something that says, "We got your roadmap to success,"
Mm.
but they don't even know who I am. Like, how that's not possibility. That's not possible then.
Whenever everybody's definition of success is different too, what
Eggs.
everybody's aspirational level, and that's
Yes.
kind of something too, I always mention in podcasts is you and I both come from this corporate background and
Mm-hmm.
have no interest in returning. But
Mm-hmm.
for some people, that's great.
Yes.
Everybody
Yes.
has their own journey and their own path.
Absolutely.
And I always try to reiterate that to people is like, hey, if that works for you and this is your life and your experience and you're getting
Yeah.
what you want out of it. But, I know for me, like I always enjoyed helping people because I was in healthcare and that's who we are. We're,
Okay.
we're caretakers.
Yes.
I don't think it's what we do, it's who we are. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how your identity kind of gets attached to it. And that's why it was so devastating when I got laid off. But, in terms of outside of that being my heart, my soul of what I wanted to do, the unfulfilling part was all this corporate stuff. It
Yes.
was very just and I would have to make my own little goals and whatnot to little games in order to get myself to achieve or hit metrics. And it was kind of more of a personal standard because I'm a type A personality, but it had nothing to do with being fulfilled in the role, and I think people
Yes.
need to understand that about themselves. And, everybody's situation is different, but when do you plan on opening up the Institute?
Open later this year. I'm testing out one system, totally honest with you. I'm
Hmm.
testing out one system right now because I don't want to have to come up with all these ways of attracting coaches and stuff like that. I believe there's somebody who's ideal at doing that. They love doing that. And so
Hmm.
I'm attaching with them. So I have a organization right now that's working on that side of it. And honestly, as soon as that happens and we prove success there, then I'll be ready to go. I have the skeleton team ready to go, excited, everything else as far as, members of the what I call the dream team
Hmm.
to launch it and everything else and make it successful and stuff. And every person, it's so cool, Richard, because every person doesn't love what I do, but they love what they do. And I don't love what they do.
Yeah, you need
You know what
that.
I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a group of people who are all loving what they're doing, but different aspects and things like that and stuff, the different areas. So
And what's it going to be called?
Life Ignited Institute.
Life
I
Ignited
already have the
Institute.
domain and I have and I already have the SMT programs in the portal for it and stuff like that. So that part's all ready to go and everything. So it's yeah, getting this other side, and then we're building the training materials and what the coaches are going to go through and the testing and all that stuff to actually receive certification in it.
And so when you came up with SMT, you said that you have a book on it or no?
No, that's the only thing. It's funny you say that because this year I know that's part of what I'm supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of procrastinating that a little bit, to be honest. But I met somebody. It's funny the way these things happen. I met somebody and they go, "You got to get your butt moving." They didn't say butt though. You got to
Yeah,
get moving on this, and they help do that stuff. So I don't want somebody to ghost write it.
right.
I want to write it, but I would like to have kind of a little bit like a mentor or coach as I'm
Yeah.
doing that can keep me on track, things like that.
Yeah, mine is, the Men of the House started off as a book idea. Then it kind
Okay.
of went to a blog because I had written maybe a couple of chapters of a book. And
Mm-hmm.
then the blog was just meh. And then it became a podcast, but I interviewed an author and she's like, you should really consider writing that book. And I think maybe I didn't have all the pieces of the story to write the book. I didn't have
Yes.
the past 3 years of the struggle I've gone through and what it took to overcome it because, people only see what you are now. They don't see the couple of years and the hard work it took to get there.
Sure.
It feels like it happened all at once, but so slow all at the same time.
Understand exactly that process very well. I understand. Yes.
But
Yeah.
she was the one that kind of like you said, and we were talking about earlier, that these doors open, these opportunities, these things come along that go,
Yes.
she's like, you should write a book. And I asked her something and she said, here's what you do. Here's how you come up with the chapters and gave me the process.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things that, when it's that time, the right people will appear. But
Yes.
one thing I like to ask everyone
Mhm.
is what is What's the unexpected kind of benefit from making this decision to leave corporate behind, do your own thing, but not just that, the sticking through it when maybe times you thought, oh man, I really made a mistake. What's something that's happened that would have never happened in a million years had you not taken this chance that has just kind of meant the world to you or very meaningful?
I definitely wouldn't be here with you right now,
That's true.
but I
Me
mean,
either.
yeah, right. There's so many, but I mean, like, the impact on the hundreds of clients that I've helped over the past decade, like, wouldn't be there. Things like things happen as we step into it that we can't plan for, we can't make happen, things like that. Like this is so awesome. And it's not me, it's not like I go, look at me, but
Right.
like because of the results of the SMT method, I've been selected for the last 4 years is one of the top 20 business coaches in the United States. And for 2024, I was selected the #1 spot.
Oh,
So things like that happen, and it's just so testament to how far I've been brought, and how every one of those things, even like you said, so many struggles are what turn into a breakthrough. Without the struggle, I can't get to the breakthrough, and I get to see those in so many areas of my life over the past 30 years and stuff, and how they've worked out, and things I thought were going to totally wreck me put me on a pathway of opening up like another breakthrough and stuff.
what's your
And
favorite type of, go ahead.
honestly, one of the things that hits me the hardest is seeing a client experience a breakthrough, seeing them experience that from the limited to the, oh my God, it could be even bigger than what my vision is,
Yeah.
and seeing that play out, man, that springs me out of bed in the morning.
It's almost like taking that, seeing somebody release their own governor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Good way to say that. Very good way to say
Man,
that. Yes.
I got like some goosebumps here thinking
I've had
about
a few
it.
times since we've been talking.
Um, what's your favorite type of coaching? Business or personal or both?
So here's what I do. So really, if you look at, like a lot of my marketing and stuff like that, it's around business coaching,
Hmm.
helping business owners, professional salespeople, entrepreneurs quickly scale their business. But I use that as a vehicle, but it's all personal transformation.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really the core of personal transformation.
Yeah. Because I kind of, it's people who go on a weight loss journey. They lose some weight
Mhm.
and then their professional life usually changes with it for the better. And
Yes.
so I can kind of see if somebody's an
Yeah.
entrepreneur and they have whatever passion it is, even if it's selling insurance or life insurance,
Yes.
still
Whatever it is. Yeah.
transforming that, making that connection, that ability to make the connection with
Yeah.
others and why it can be important of taking care of family, generational wealth, anything. Um,
Yes.
and they
Yeah.
become passionate about that. And so
Yeah.
I could definitely see
And
how that
we
works.
can never impact a single area of our life. Like, even like I said, my marketing and stuff is set up towards
Hmm.
business growth, things like that. So, but I have people come to me because they want to find that love relationship. They're tired of like the on and off and back, and starting something and then it ending, and things like that and stuff. It could be financial type of stuff. It could be health, well-being. It doesn't matter. But any of those, anything we step into is going to impact every area of our life.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think sometimes it's kind of, you get a little heavy on one, but then you just start evening out the others, you know, tackle,
Yeah.
tackle a little bit at a time and start to bring them all up.
And
Um,
most times we don't even have to focus. Somebody that's been struggling to get business growth, and things like that and stuff, and we'll start working together, and that'll be kind of like the emphasis. The upfront thing is grow the business and stuff, and so we'll start there, and they'll start going, oh my God, you won't believe what happened in my relationship, or you won't believe what happened in another area. And it's because when we open it up, it's impossible to impact one single area of our life. It spreads throughout our life.
Man, I feel like every organization should probably offer coaching and therapy to their associates for free to make them realize all this stuff because think about how dynamic, like if I had two clinics, I had 10 providers, 26 direct reports, but it's like if you put 30, 40 people in a building together with all these different factors and all this different programming, sometimes you could be surprised that anything actually works.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I have realtor organizations, I have insurance organizations that will hire me to come in and do weekly masterminds and things like that, and then we can break off and do. Now that they don't cover like if I do coaching with somebody and stuff like that, but open up those
Yeah.
avenues. I've had companies that have brought me in just to coach with the people's on, the individuals on the
Uh-huh.
team. It might be the core team, it might be the sales team, whatever it is,
Yeah.
but that impacts the entire organization by doing that.
I love that. Because,
Yeah,
if nothing else, it gets a small group of people in the same room on the same page, and at least kind of the brain waves can the energy's all kind of in one place.
yes,
And if nothing else, at least one little pillar of an organization gets a little something that can
yeah,
potentially be motivating or make one shift. You can say one thing and you can make one shift in somebody's mind that just sets them on a totally different path or gives them
yes.
just a little more fuel or a little more fire or hunger.
And I'll tell you, Richard, an example of that, the last organization I helped that was in bankruptcy, we would meet 5 days a week with the court, the leadership team and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and we would meet for an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. And all it would just be is like a huge complaint session.
Oh yeah.
What's going wrong? What's this? What's that? And for a month, I would say, man, can we talk? Can we take 2 minutes and just talk about something that's going good in here? And people would just call me Mr. Over Optimistic and this and that and everything else. And so finally, and I just stayed at, and I don't even know why I stayed at because I'd walk out there going, I'm not saying that anymore. You guys just run it, do it, and I would feel like that giving up place. But then I'd get in the next day and it would happen. It would bother me. And I do, something similar and stuff. And finally, one day I go, and then the president and everybody was in the room, and I go, stop. And I hit my hands on the table. I go, can somebody please just to shut me up, can somebody please tell me one thing that's going good in your area? And the guy that dealt with small parts talked about, we saw this high scrap rate. And one of my guys came up with the idea that if we switch this and this, that maybe it would reduce the scrap rate. So we did it. And it took our scrap rate from 30-some% down into the teens. And the guy sitting on the other side of the room goes, hold on, hold on. He was in charge of the larger parts, the guy on the other side of the room. He goes, hold on, hold on. Explain that to me. And so he told again what he did. He goes, Dad, we got the same problem. He goes, we did this, this, and this, and it brought our scrap rate down into the teens. So now he took that information and went out. About a week later, he came in there. And as we're sharing all the problems and everything else, he goes, I got one thing for Mr. Over Optimistic. And and so he said that they incorporated the same thing that the other guy did, and they took their scrap rate from, I don't know if he was 20s or where he was at, down to the single digits.
Oh.
And the president just looked at me across the table because he was one of the ones that started the over optimistic thing, and he just went. And what I noticed after that is we'd walk out of the conference room, and my office was right next door to it, and I'd walk in my office, and people would come in my office and they would close the door as quick as they could because they didn't want anybody to see them in there. And they would start asking me more about this methodology as far as looking at the positives and things like that. And that picking up and growing is what ended up bringing in the new owners, dump $12 million in the operation, and instantly take them from a 3-day a month operation to a 5-day a week operation.
If you look for problems, that's all you're gonna get. And
We're going to expand them.
I used to always tell my team, I go, look, I don't want to know why we can't do it. I want to figure
Yeah.
out how we're gonna do it,
Yes.
because then you get people looking for solutions. And I would always say we don't have to be tied to methods. A bad process will fail on its own. We don't need to make it try. But this thing could be your next best friend. So our job is just to give it a try, give it 100%. And yeah, I don't know. It is fun to lead sometimes if you can get people to do it and buy into it and they get something and they get that and then they start to trust you and they're like, oh, all we have to do is try. And it did
And
work.
I want to say one thing about that if I can.
Yeah.
Because we talk about leadership. I've been hired for like 2 years in a row down here to lead an 8-month leadership for the government, for business owners, things like that. And so, and so much of our leadership of how we lead is robotic. Because we go to school, we get education, we get whatever it is and everything else, and they tell us here's how to be a leader. But if you look at true leadership, it's when you come up against something exactly. I mean, I'm not bragging or anything, but that situation with the bankruptcy and sticking to what I know is right and bringing that forth and things like that, that's true leadership. It's not something you learn in a book and how the way you say things, this and that and everything. That's not leadership. Leadership, we all have it in us. Leadership comes from our core based on what we know to be the right thing to do. And when we bring that forward, when we clear out the conditioning and stuff like that, and we bring that forward, that's how you get leaders that truly shape the world and organizations in it.
I don't think I'll be going back to corporate, but I do miss leadership a little. Do you have any questions for me before we hop off?
I got a lot, but we'll talk after this.
Yeah.
You and I and stuff. But yeah, one thing I just want to say, if anybody wants to talk more about this, I keep a schedule, a calendar going with open 15-minute slots to get on the phone, just talk about these things. So somebody will come up and they'll go, man, I'm stuck here, and I can help them figure out an avenue to move through that and stuff like that. Like, I'm very open to that. If I can help in any way, shape, or form, just reach out. And I have a link set up. It's coachwithjoey.com. And schedule a 15-minute call. We'll jump on the phone and just walk through what it is and see if I can help you.
Yeah, and all that will be in the show notes.
Yeah, okay.
And whatnot. But yeah, I get a lot to think about for the day as I spend time with my daughter and stuff like that. But I love these conversations. I love self-improvement, and mostly because, kind of like you, I'm not as far into it.
Yeah.
It's been about 3 years, but the most progress has actually come, I would say, in the past 6 months. But that's how it is.
That's awesome. And the other thing I'll say, last thing is if you're watching Richard's podcast here and you're getting anything out of it at all, leave comments and things like that. Like, be part of the growth of this. Share this with people who otherwise wouldn't get to hear his message and the guests he's bringing and the information that he's opening up and doing a great job as a host and stuff like that. And opening that up, share that with people who otherwise wouldn't get an avenue. As we help other people to succeed and achieve what they're going after, it makes our pathway even easier for the same thing to happen. So share this information.
That's how we're going to make the world a better place, is everybody
we
sharing
are making
it.
the world a better place.
Yeah. And I think too, if nothing else, I think one of the things people will get from this is how understanding that programming, that subconscious, that motherboard, and understanding that all the people you share your life with have a bit of that too. So give yourself a little grace, give them a little grace, be understanding, figure out what's holding you down and what you can do to change that. Because, you got to remember that, we are everything we consume, from our outside world to our social media. And a lot of who we are is what we've already consumed through being programmed, and some of it just needs to get rid of. You got to get rid of it, and as the world evolves, so will we. And I'm just happy that as Gen Xers, we're moving into this space where we're getting more into the mind and understanding this, because I think it's making the difference to I definitely want my daughter to grow up to be more than I am, because there's more tools available. And I know this definitely impacts my parenting, and I always think about, what do I want to put on her subconscious or not?
Yeah. And the other thing I want to add to when you said that about the conditioning, our conditioning is always adding more conditioning. So if our conditioning is lack and limitation and hard and massive actions, exhaustive efforts, all that stuff, everything we do in every day is just reinforcing and building that stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And it won't change until we do something about it. But the good news in that is the process of identifying, shifting, and doing all that. It can be expansive and exciting and enjoyable. It doesn't have to be like, digging skeletons out of the closet.
Yeah, change doesn't have to be bad. And
No.
mental health, that I think we need to talk about it. I think it's important, but I want mental health to have a shift in that it doesn't automatically take us to this pucker factor of it's something negative. I want it to be like fitness. When I hear mental health, I hear like
Right.
obesity or something. I want to hear like mental health and think of the same way you would think of a triathlete or something, like a mental
Yeah.
fitness.
Yeah.
And, hopefully by talking about this stuff and as we're learning more about the brain and everybody's being more open and more vulnerable, we'll switch the world from mental health being a negative thing, to it being a positive thing. And
Absolutely. It already is happening.
yeah, and the
So,
conversation is where it started. And you know, while I'm not for it, and I think we were duped a little bit, but maybe the pandemic was the thing that fueled this. And if it did and it brings us to a better place and makes a better world, then it happened. We can't undo it, so we might as well make the best of it and figure out what we can learn from it. And if learning about freedom and learning to talk about being vulnerable and open about mental health and people getting better and um, how we live as families and men,
yeah.
then
Yeah.
if that all gets better from it, then hey, maybe it will have been worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. This
You
has
know.
been really enjoyable, Richard.
Well, thank you, man. And I will definitely, yeah, I'll definitely hit you up. And I'm gonna go spend some. I got to take my daughter to the tutor, and then we're gonna go
Yeah.
to the mall and hang out, and just gonna enjoy spending time with
Good
family,
for you.
be in
Good
the
for you, man.
present.
Yes, sir.
I
Yep.
can
Yep.
if I have life has afforded me to do this, so I'm gonna do it. The time is
Yeah.
now.
And you're doing it well.
I'm trying.
Well, no, you're not trying. You're doing.
Well, thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
so much,
All
man.
right.
All right,
You
man.
have a
You have a
blessed day,
good
man.
day. All right.
Yeah, we will definitely touch base soon because I got some things to
Yeah.
talk to you about.
Awesome. I love this
All
interview.
right.
Thank you.
Me too.
All
Take
right.
it easy. Bye.
Bye. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Asteroid